Turkey's recent election revealed stark details about the country's fast-changing demographics. The nation, while still relatively young compared to Europe, is aging. The proportion of its elderly population and retirees is increasing at a steady pace, and the pool of its young people is shrinking compared to previous years. This isn't just limited to Turkiye. Dozens of countries are seeing similar shifts in their populations, as Zeynep Gokce explains.
Residents all over Turkey voted in the country's local elections on March 31st. The Supreme Election Council said more than 60 million people were eligible to vote for over 1,000 municipals. But who are they, and which groups had the most effect on the results? While more than 30 million of them were men, the women numbered almost 1 million more, and part of those possible voters were in metropolitan cities, which adds up to over 45 million voters. Turkey's largest city and commercial hub, Istanbul, takes the biggest share with 11 million, while the capital, Ankara, follows with 4 million. And there are the newcomers, a little over 1 million citizens who just turned 18 and were eligible to vote for the first time, with most of them registered in the country's southeast. When it comes to folks over 75, well, they held more than 3 million of the potential votes. That brings us to the latest findings of the Turkish Statistical Institute. Data shows although Turkey is still among countries with a young population, its elderly ratio hit a record high in 2023. As for the median age in Turkey, it's moved from the late 20s towards the mid-30s over the past 16 years. Another notable statistic is that a little over 2 million people retired last year, meaning retired electors have increased more than the young ones. But the aging population is not only an issue in Turkey. The UN says it's a trend that's growing worldwide, from Japan to Italy. While people living longer is actually positive news, in the case of Italy, there's fears the country will eventually fail to afford its pension and welfare system. Fertility rates are also adding to the problem. For instance, China might have ended its one-child policy in 2015, but its birth rate still hit a record low last year. The data adds to concerns that one of the world's biggest economies' growth prospects are decreasing due to fewer workers and consumers. The UN says Turkey has also moved to the category of countries with a very old population, another example of the ongoing global demographic shift. But how big of a problem it will be depends on the policies the nation will implement in the next decade. Zeynep Gokce, Strait Talk.
And for more on Turkey's and the world's aging population, joining me now from Ankara is Miriam Khan. She is the resident representative of the United Nations Population Fund. And Ahmet Sinan Turkyilmaz. He is a professor at Hacettepe University and is a member of its Institute of Population Studies. A warm welcome to you both, and thanks for joining me on Strait Talk. So, Miriam, according to the latest data, Turkey is still a relatively young country, but its elderly population hit record high in 2023. So what's the reason behind this?
Thanks for asking that. It's important to bear in mind that aging is a very natural phenomena for all countries. The global world demographics are changing, and Turkey's aging population is actually quite comparable to the world average. When you look in comparison to Europe, actually, Turkey has a younger population than a lot of the European subcontinent. So when looked at in the larger frame of reference of how countries and their populations change, what is happening in Turkey vis-a-vis an aging population is a very natural, it's a very normal phenomenon. What is important is to consider the policy implications, to accept this demographic reality, to prepare for it, and to make sure that good regular data is taken into account in developing policies and strategies to cope with this.
So, Ahmet, would you agree with Miriam? I mean, what would an aging population mean for the future of Turkey? Because we have an 85 million people. I mean, how will it change its needs, and what should be done to stop or reverse this trend?
Yeah, as Miriam said, it is an ongoing phenomenon for almost all countries. Turkey is one of them, and it just reached a cutoff point of 10%, where the countries are started to name as age countries. But if you look at from the absolute numbers, so 10% meaning at 8.5 million population, and according to the projections, this will reach almost 12 million in 2040 and will reach a population of age people of 20 million in 2050. So, as you said, it is an ongoing process, and the future of the country will have a more age population.
So, Miriam, this demographic shift is not confined to Turkiye. It's also part of a worldwide trend. So what are the driving forces behind this population shift?
For population, there are three factors that affect a country's population dynamics. It's births, deaths, and migration. So what affects births? It's health systems. What affects deaths? It's also health systems. For Turkiye, we know that the investments in the health have been very high, and they have shown dramatic improvements in the reduction of infant mortality, the reduction of maternal mortality. So people are able to choose freely and responsibly how many children they're having. And the desired family size across the world, as countries become richer, and as countries become more educated, becomes smaller. That phenomenon has affected the births in Turkey. Similarly, people are living longer than ever before. Other than the blip of COVID pandemic, lifespans in most countries tend to be increasing. That is also the case of Turkey. These are things to be celebrated. So as we look at these changes, the aging of a society is a very natural phenomena, and that's where we are today for Turkey.
So, but from a geopolitical stand of view, Ahmet, I mean, how are geopolitical risks and economic difficulties impacting fertility rates?
Yeah, fertility rate has decreased even dramatically that we have projected for the close times. As has an impact, it has social and economic impacts. So, especially from the elderly view, there might be some impacts on the shift in the family dynamics, some social isolation, and maybe some increased demand for long-term care. And if you look at from the economic impacts, of course, there might be some lower economic growth, and then labor shortages. And there are several risks when we look at that perspective. So the proportion, of course, decreasing by the decrease in the fertility, but also increase in the lifespan. So people living longer, and we have relatively less births compared to the past.
So, Miriam, in your previous comment, you mentioned immigration. So can immigration solve the problem of an aging population, and what kind of social and economic risks does it bear?
Immigration or migration, immigration and emigration, which is out-migration, are all factors to be considered by countries as they manage and look at what policy options they have to manage the workforce, to address consequences of pensions. Along with that, I think it's important to consider that women's workforce participation is an important factor to consider, as is the young people who are not in education, employment, or training. All three of these factors can have a significant impact on the need for a workforce of a country, the pension system of the country, and the overall well-being of the population. So immigration, when safe, orderly, managed, can be an asset that is a policy consideration to be considered. Many countries do consider it across the world, but those choices have to be done in line with the risks. Countries have taken different options. What we do know is that unsafe migration poses a threat to the individuals involved and the host communities also. So it is important that migration be recognized as a phenomenon that can really help world economies, that can help people,
Yes.
in managing population dynamics.
So, Ahmet, what are your views on that? Could immigration solve the demographic dilemma?
Yeah, might be, but as Miriam said, there are several risks. So for the characteristics of the immigrants, it may cause some the risks, but on the other hand, if we kind of shape a skilled immigration so that the can kind of addressing the, let's say, laboring shortages and others, and also developing the integration programs and with a good planning. Yes, but considering the diversity and the others, and also the social tensions, so we should be very careful who are the immigrants and what are the needs of the country. So that's why the structure of the immigrants can be designed, if possible, of course, because there are several types of immigration. As Turkey facing kind of the displacements or forced immigration. So if this is a part of a plan for future age structure, yes, it might, but with a good planning.
So, Miriam, are most countries able to cope with their aging populations in general, and do they have the proper policies in place?
When we look across the world, we can see which countries are amongst those with the highest levels of aged population. Japan, Italy, China are some of these countries which in their demographic transition have moved further ahead. And when we look at the policies, social policies, economic policies, measures related to women's workforce participation, young people's engagement in the workforce, comprehensive set of measures need to be taken. There's many lessons to be learned from the experiences of Japan, South Korea, on which investments have been seen to be effective in managing a larger number of elderly, and which measures have maybe not been so effective. Experts and the research that UNFPA has also done shows that undue attention only on fertility is not effective. It is imperative that people's rights be protected. It is imperative that women continue to have autonomy over decisions affecting their bodies and their lives and their futures, and that women and couples can choose freely if, when, and how many children to have.
All right, Miriam. And Ahmet, unfortunately, we'll have to leave it here. Thank you very much for joining me on Strait Talk.